The research station floated high above planet Infernus, safe from the hell below. Inside the main observation deck, 17 different alien species watched the burning world through reinforced windows. They came from across the Confederation, brought together by one shared curiosity. What could possibly live down there? Planet Infernus was not a place for living things. The surface temperature reached 800 degrees on a cool day. Rivers of molten rock flowed across the landscape like water. The air itself could melt most metals within hours. Every computer model, every simulation, every expert agreed. Infernus was a dead world that killed anything foolish enough to land there. Dr. Sarah Chun stood at the window and disagreed with every expert in the galaxy. She was human, which meant she was new to the Confederation. Her species had only joined 5 years ago, and most aliens still did not know what to make of humans. They seemed soft compared to the Traki warriors with their armored shells. They seemed weak compared to the Volcari with their incredible minds. They seemed fragile in every way that mattered for survival in space. Sarah pressed her hand against the window. Down below, a volcano erupted, sending a fountain of lava into the toxic sky. Beautiful and deadly. Perfect. "You cannot be serious," said Schmoss. The Volcari scientist stood beside her, his skin shifting through worried shades of blue. The Volcari could not lie, and their skin showed their emotions whether they wanted it to or not. Right now, Schmoss was very worried. The longest any species has survived on the surface is 6 hours and 12 minutes. That was a Traki in the best armor we could build. "I know," Sarah said. She had read every report, studied every failed mission. The numbers did not scare her. Numbers were just information. The sulfuric compounds in the atmosphere will eat through your suit. I know. The heat will cook you alive inside your own equipment. I know. Then why? Schmoss's skin flashed red now, the Volcari color for confusion. "Why would you do this?" Sarah smiled. It was not a happy smile or a sad smile. It was the smile of someone who had already made up their mind. Because nobody has tried hard enough yet. The other scientists gathered around when they heard this. A Taraki warrior named Catherine clicked her mandibles in what might have been laughter or might have been respect. The Luminary observer, who existed partly as energy and partly as matter, pulsed with interest. Even the small Quellan engineer stopped his nervous grooming to listen. "I have calculated your probability of survival," Schmoss said quietly. 30 days on the surface. The number's 0.003%. "So you are saying there is a chance," Sarah replied. The aliens did not understand human humor very well yet. They stared at her in silence. Sarah turned back to the window. "I am going down there for 30 days. I am going to collect samples of the extremophile organisms we have detected. I am going to map the lava tube systems. And I am going to prove that Infernus can be studied from the ground, not just from orbit." "You will die," said the Quellan engineer. His voice was high and quick with anxiety. "Your suit will fail. We have run every simulation." "Simulations are not reality," Sarah said. "Reality is Messier. Reality has variables your computers cannot predict. And reality includes human stubbornness, which I promise you have not properly calculated." She was right about that. The Confederation had encountered many species, but humans were strange in ways that did not fit their models. Humans did things that should not work, but somehow did. They took risks that seemed suicidal but sometimes paid off. They refused to accept limits that every other species treated as laws of nature. 3 days later, Sarah Chun descended to Infernus in a reinforced landing pod. The heat hit her suit the moment she opened the door. 800 degrees of pure hostility wrapped around her like a living thing. The ground beneath her boots was dark rock that had once been liquid fire. Steam rose from cracks in the surface. In the distance, A lake of lava glowed orange and red. Her suit's computer spoke in her ear with a calm female voice. External temperature, 794 degrees Celsius. Suit integrity, 98%. Estimated safe operation time, 72 hours. Understood, Sarah said. She began walking toward a nearby rock formation. Her equipment weighed almost as much as she did, but she had trained for this. Humans were not the strongest species, but they were good at carrying heavy things for long distances. Evolution had made them into endurance hunters. Creatures that simply kept going until their prey collapsed from exhaustion. Sarah planned to outlast the planet. By the end of day 3. Her cooling system started making a noise it should not make. A grinding sound, metal on metal, the sound of something wearing out too fast. The engineers on the station heard it over the communication link and immediately began arguing about what it meant. "You need to come back up," Schmoss said. His voice was tight with worry. "The system is failing early." Sarah knelt beside a vent where superheated gas hissed from the ground. She carefully collected a sample of the red bacteria growing along its edge. Life, actual life, thriving in conditions that should sterilize everything. "Not yet," she said. "I have work to do. Dr. Chun, please be reasonable." "I am being reasonable," Sarah said. She stood up and moved to the next collection site. "I am just not being careful." There is a difference. The aliens watching from above did not understand the difference. But they would learn. Humans had come to the Confederation with many gifts, but the greatest gift was this: the absolute refusal to quit when quitting made sense. Sarah worked through day 4, then day 5, then day 6. Her suit's cooling system kept grinding. She kept improvising repairs using spare parts and creativity. The aliens kept calculating her odds of survival. The numbers kept getting worse, but Sarah kept working. And Planet Infernus began to learn what every human already knew: that determination was its own kind of strength. More powerful than armor, more lasting than any machine. The fire thought it could win through heat and time and relentless pressure. It did not know that humans had been shaped by the same forces, hardened by them, made into creatures that simply would not stop. On day 7, Sarah established the first permanent camp on the surface of Infernus. She planted a flag made of heat-resistant fabric. She sent a picture back to the station. In the image, she was smiling despite the hell around her. The message attached to the picture was simple. Day 7. Everything is fine. The volcano makes good coffee heat. Nobody knew if she was joking. With humans, it was often hard to tell. Sarah had been on Infernus for 16 days when the planet decided to get serious. She woke to her suit's alarm screaming in her ear. The ground beneath her small shelter was shaking hard enough to rattle her teeth. Outside, the orange glow of dawn was wrong. Too bright, coming from the wrong direction. She pulled up the seismic data on her suit's display and her stomach dropped. 7 major eruptions had started in the last hour. 3 were close. Too close. "Station, this is Chun," she said into her communicator. "I am seeing some activity here." Schmoss' voice came back immediately, high and fast with panic. "Dr. Chun, you need to evacuate now. Immediately. We are reading catastrophic seismic events across your entire region." Sarah climbed out of her shelter and looked around. To the north, a massive column of smoke and ash rose into the sky. To the east, she could see the glow of fresh lava cutting across the landscape. To the south, the ground itself seemed to be bleeding fire. "What is the evacuation window?" she asked. There was a pause. Too long of a pause. Then Schmoss spoke again, and his voice was the voice of someone delivering a death sentence. 14 minutes. The lava flows are converging on your position from 3 directions. In 14 minutes, everything within 5 kilometers of you will be under molten rock. Sarah looked at her camp. Samples she had collected over 16 days. Equipment she had carefully maintained and repaired. Data that could change how the Confederation understood extreme life. "Can you extend the window?" she asked. "No." Schmoss' voice broke. "Please, Sarah. Please come home." She had never heard him use her first name before. That told her everything about how bad this was. Sarah made a decision. It was not a smart decision. It was not a safe decision. But it was a human decision, the kind that other species would never understand. "I am not evacuating," she said. The communication channel exploded with voices. Schmoss begging. Catherine demanding. The Quellan engineer calculating. The Luminari observer pulsing with distress. Every species on the station trying to make her see reason. Sarah turned down the volume and started grabbing her most important equipment. She could not carry everything, so she chose fast. Sample containers, water recycler, backup oxygen scrubbers, emergency rations. Everything else would burn, but these things she needed to live. "There is a cave system 2 kilometers west," she said over the noise. "I mapped it last week. Deep tunnels. I am going there. The caves will fill with lava," Schmoss said. "The heat will kill you even if the lava does not reach you." "Maybe," Sarah said. She started running. 2 kilometers in a suit that weighed as much as she did, across broken ground that could melt her boots, with toxic air burning at the seals of her helmet. But maybe is better than definitely. She ran. Behind her, the sound of the approaching lava was like 1,000 waterfalls made of rock and fire. The ground shook with each step. Cracks opened in the surface, breathing steam and sulfur. Her suit's temperature alarms were screaming now, all of them, a chorus of warnings that she could not stop to address. 1 kilometer. Her legs burned. Her lungs burned. Everything burned. 500 meters. The cave entrance was ahead, a black mouth in the red landscape. 200 meters. The heat was cooking her, even through the suit's failing systems. She could smell her own sweat turning to steam. Sarah dove into the cave entrance as the first wave of lava crested the ridge behind her. The heat followed her in like a living thing, but the tunnel angled downward, away from the surface into the planet's depths. She ran deeper. The tunnel was old lava tube, formed millions of years ago when this world was even more violent than now. The walls were smooth volcanic glass, black and slick. Her boots slipped with each step, but she kept moving because stopping meant dying. Behind her, the sound changed. The roar of the lava flow was muffled now, distant, but still there, still coming. She ran until her suit's lights showed her a junction, 3 tunnels branching in different directions. She picked the one that led deepest and kept going. For 6 hours, Sarah descended into an furnace. Her suit's outside sensors showed the temperature above climbing higher and higher as the lava flows merged on the surface. 800 degrees. 1,000. 1,200. The planet's entire surface was melting, reforming, becoming new. Finally, she found it. A chamber deep enough that the heat was only 300 degrees. Still hot enough to cook meat, but her suit could handle 300 if she was careful. There was water here too, seeping from cracks in the rock and flashing to steam. But water she could maybe, possibly, with some luck and a lot of work. Capture and use. Sarah collapsed against the wall and let herself breathe for the first time in hours. "Station, this is Chun," she said. "I am in the caves. I am alive." The response was immediate and loud. Relief, anger, confusion, all mixing together in a dozen alien languages. Schmoss finally got control of the channel. "Your suit telemetry shows critical damage. Your cooling system is at 15%. Your oxygen scrubbers are failing. Sarah, you have perhaps 2 days." "Then I had better get to work," she said. What followed was not survival. It was war. Sarah against physics, chemistry, biology, and every law of nature that said she should be dead. She built a water condenser from parts of her, damaged equipment and volcanic minerals she scraped from the walls. It should not have worked, but she made it work anyway through trial, error, and pure stubbornness. She stretched her 30 days of rations by eating half portions, then quarter portions, then portions so small they were almost imaginary. Her body burned through its stored fat. Her muscles began to eat themselves. She became thin and sharp like a knife. Her oxygen scrubber died on day 19. She built a new one using chemistry she barely understood and materials she had to guess about. The first version killed her air quality. The second version worked for 6 hours. The third version, built with hands that shook from hunger and exhaustion, somehow kept her alive. Above, on the station, the aliens stopped calculating her odds. The numbers had become meaningless. She was alive in conditions that should have killed her 10 different ways. Mathematics could not explain it. Biology could not explain it. Only humans could understand what was happening down there in the dark, and he thought Sarah was doing what humans had always done. She was refusing to die simply because dying made sense. On day 23, her communication system finally gave up. The heat and sulfur and constant repairs had eaten through components that were never meant to last this long. Her voice cut out mid-sentence, and then there was only silence. But her suit's automated beacon kept transmitting. A simple signal pulsing out through the rock and fire. Just a heartbeat made her radio waves, saying the same thing over and over. Still here. Still alive. Still fighting. The aliens listened to that beacon like it was a holy thing. The Draki began singing war songs in her honor. The Velkari recorded every second of telemetry like scripture. The Luminari, who lived partly in energy and knew things about persistence that matter-based life did not, began to understand something profound about humanity. Tathrin, the Draki warrior, finally put it into words. She should be dead, the warrior said, mandibles clicking slowly with thought. By every measure we understand, she died days ago. But she does not accept death. She simply continues. 4 days passed with only the beacon's silent pulse. 4 days of wondering if the next pulse would be the last. 4 days of hoping and fearing in equal measure. And then, on day 27, the lava finally cooled enough to attempt a rescue. The rescue team landed on newly formed rock that was still warm enough to glow faintly in the darkness. Schmoss led the team himself, despite the danger, despite his species' weakness in heat. Some things mattered more than safety. They found the cave entrance half buried in cooled lava. It took 3 hours to dig through. Every member of the team expected to find a body, if they found anything at all. The beacon was still transmitting, but beacons could run on backup power long after their wearer had died. Catherine entered the cave first, of Draki armor proof against the residual heat. Her light swept across the tunnel, and she saw the marks Sarah had left. Scrape marks on the walls where she had collected minerals. Boot prints in the dust. Signs of someone moving deeper with purpose, not fleeing in panic. They followed the trail down. The temperature rose as they descended, approaching the limits even Catherine could tolerate. The Volcari engineer on the team was already struggling, his cooling suit working at maximum capacity. Then, Catherine's light found something that made her stop. "I have her," she said into the comm, her voice strange. She's walking toward us." Sarah Chun emerged from the darkness like a ghost. Her suit was barely recognizable, patched with volcanic glass and held together with improvised seals made from materials that should not work. She had lost so much weight that the suit hung loose on her frame. Her hair had been singed short on one side where a seal had briefly failed. Her face was hollow, eyes sunken, skin stretched tight over bones. She was carrying 73 sample containers. "Hello," Sarah said. Her voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper. "Sorry about the communication failure. I meant to fix it, but I got busy." Catherine, who had fought in 3 wars and seen warriors die in every way possible, felt something she had never felt before. Not pity, not sympathy, but awe. Pure, absolute awe at the will required to survive what this human had survived. "You should not be alive," Catherine said. "I get that a lot," Sarah replied. Then she collapsed. The medical bay on the station became the center of attention for the next week. Every species sent their best doctors to examine the human who had outlasted fire. They found dehydration at levels that should have caused organ failure, muscle atrophy that should have left her unable to walk, chemical imbalances that should have stopped her heart, but her heart kept beating. Slow and steady and absolutely refusing to quit. Sarah woke on the 3rd day. Schmoss was sitting beside her bed, his skin cycling through colors that meant he was experiencing too many emotions at once to settle on just one. "You are an idiot," he said. It was perhaps the most human thing he had ever said. "Yes," Sarah agreed. Her voice was still rough, but stronger. "But I am an idiot with samples." She insisted on debriefing before she would rest properly. They moved her to a conference room where she could sit instead of lie down, brought her water and food she could barely eat, and listened. For 8 hours, Sarah Chun presented her findings. She had mapped over 40 kilometers of lava tubes, most of which remained stable even during the eruption. She had identified 3 separate ecosystems of extremophile organisms, each adapted to different temperature ranges. She had found evidence that Infernus might once have been cooler. That life here was not a recent accident, but an ancient persistence. Most importantly, she had proven that permanent research stations could exist on Infernus. Not on the surface, but in the depths. The planet itself had created spaces where life could exist. Tunnels and chambers where temperature and chemistry balanced just enough for the right equipment and the right determination to succeed. "How?" Schmoss finally asked. "How did you survive? Please, I need to understand." "Every calculation said you would die." Sarah was quiet for a moment. She looked down at her hands, which still shook slightly from the ordeal. "My ancestors used to hunt animals by chasing them," she said slowly. "Not by being faster, not by being stronger, but by just not stopping. They would chase an antelope for hours, for days sometimes, until the animal was so tired it could not run anymore. Then they would walk up and finish it." She looked up at the assembled scientists. "Humans are not the biggest or the strongest or the smartest species, but we are really, really good at not stopping. We took that hunting method and made it part of who we are. Marathons, mountain climbing, space exploration. We just keep going until the thing we are chasing gets tired of running." "But Infernus is not an animal," the Quellan engineer said. "It is a planet. It does not get tired." Sarah smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine. "No, but the eruption ended. The lava cooled. The crisis passed. I just had to outlast it. The planet threw everything at me, and I threw stubbornness back. Eventually, one of us was going to quit. I decided it would not be me." The room was silent. The concept was so simple it seemed stupid, but it had worked. Against all probability, against all sense, it had worked. Catherine clicked her mandibles slowly. "You are a warrior," she said. "Not of weapons, but of will. My people respect this." "Your people are kind," Sarah said. "But I am just stubborn. There is a difference." "I am not certain there is," Catherine replied. The data Sarah brought back changed everything. Within weeks, the Confederation approved funding for a permanent research station on Infernus, to be built in the lava tubes she had discovered. The tubes were named the Chun Tunnels, though Sarah protested the honor. But more than the data, more than the discovery, Sarah had changed how the Confederation thought about humans. Before, they had been seen as the new species, the ones still learning, the ones who needed guidance. Soft creatures from a mild planet, protected by technology from the harsh realities of space. Now they were the species that could survive the unsurvivable. The ones who looked at impossible and heard difficult. The ones who brought not strength or intelligence or special adaptations, but something the Confederation had never properly valued before: the absolute refusal to accept defeat. Requests for human consultants began flooding in from research teams across Confederation space. The reasoning was always the same. If a human could survive Infernus, what else could they survive? What other uninhabitable worlds might yield their secrets to human stubbornness? Sarah recovered slowly. The doctor said it would take months for her body to fully heal. She listened to their advice, followed their treatment plan, and then, on week 6, requested permission to return to Infernus to help build the permanent station. They told her no. They told her she needed more time. They told her that surviving once did not mean she could survive again. She went anyway, of course. She was human, which meant no was just the starting point for negotiation. This time she brought a team. 20 scientists from 8 species, all of them choosing to trust that if a human said the Chum tunnels were safe, they probably were. Not certainly safe, not absolutely safe, but probably safe, which for Infernus was practically a paradise. Schmoss went with her. Catherine went with her. Even the nervous Quellum engineer went, because if she could survive, maybe survival was more about attitude than ability. They descended into the depths of Infernus together, humans and aliens working side by side, building something permanent in a place that killed permanence. And Sarah Chun, who had outlasted fire, taught them all that the greatest discoveries often came not from being smart or strong, but from simply refusing to quit when quitting made sense. The station grew. The research flourished. And Infernus, the planet that killed everything, learned to coexist with creatures too stubborn to die. 3 years passed, and Sarah Chun became a legend. She did not want to be a legend. She wanted to be a scientist doing her work in peace. But the Confederation had other ideas about what she represented. Her survival on Infernus had been recorded, analyzed, and distributed across thousands of worlds. Young beings of dozens of species learned her story in their schools. The human who outlasted fire became a phrase used to teach lessons about determination. Sarah found this embarrassing. Catherine found it hilarious. You broke their understanding of possible. The Truckee warrior told her over lunch in the Chen Tunnels research station. Now you must accept the consequences of breaking things. The station had grown far beyond its original design. 60 researchers now lived and worked in the tunnel systems, representing 12 different species. They studied the extremophiles, mapped the planet's geology, and pushed the boundaries of what science could accomplish in hostile environments. The station bore Sarah's name, even though she still protested. But the real change was happening far from Infernus. Sarah's survival had sparked something across the Confederation. A shift in thinking that rippled outward like waves from a stone dropped in water. The Velkari had always believed their species was limited to cold environments. Their biology required temperatures below freezing for comfort, and anything above 20 degrees Celsius caused them pain. This was simply a fact of Velkari existence, as unchangeable as gravity. Then a human engineer named Marcus spent 6 months on the Velkari homeworld. He studied their biology with the kind of obsessive focus that humans brought to problems they found interesting. He listened when the Velkari explained why temperature limits were absolute. Then he ignored them and designed cooling implants anyway. The Volcari said it would not work. Marcus said maybe it would not, but maybe it was worth trying. The first prototype failed. The second prototype worked for an hour. The third prototype let a Volcari scientist named Sham work comfortably in a 25-degree room for an entire day. Sham cried when it happened. Not from pain, but from joy. An entire universe of warm worlds had just opened to his species. Worlds they had written off as forever beyond reach were suddenly possible destinations. All because a human had decided that biological limits were more like biological suggestions. Marcus, when asked how he had done it, shrugged. Sarah Chun survived 800 degrees with a broken cooling suit, he said. This seemed easier. The Draki had their own revelation. They had always prided themselves on being the Confederation's warriors, the tough ones, the survivors. Their culture valued physical strength and resilience above all else. They believed they had pushed their bodies to the absolute limit of what biology allowed. Then human Marines came to train with them. The humans were smaller, weaker, with no natural armor. In direct combat, a Traki could break a human in half. But the training was not about combat. It was about endurance. The humans introduced concepts the Traki had never formalized. Mental resilience. Pushing through pain. The difference between cannot continue and do not want to continue. They taught breathing techniques, psychological tricks, ways to convince your body that it had more to give, even when it insisted it was empty. Catherine participated in the training personally. She ran alongside human soldiers until her legs screamed. She lifted weights until her muscles failed. She pushed past points she had always treated as her body's absolute limits. And she discovered those limits had been negotiable all along. We thought we were strong, she told Sarah during a visit to Infernus. We are strong, but you humans taught us that strength is not just muscle. It is the voice in your head that says, keep going, when everything else says stop. That voice is very annoying, Sarah said. Trust me. Yes, Catherine agreed. But it wins battles. The Draki incorporated human training methods into their military academies. Their soldiers became more capable, not because they were stronger, but because they believed they could push further. Human instructors became prized consultants. The phrase human endurance entered the Traki language as a term meaning to exceed one's perceived limitations. Species after species encountered the same pattern. The Luminari, who existed partly as energy, learned from humans how to maintain cohesion in hostile environments for longer periods. The Quellan, naturally anxious and careful, learned that calculated risks sometimes paid off better than perfect caution. The small pictol species, who had never considered themselves explorers, started joining expeditions after seeing that size mattered, less than determination. Everywhere humans went in the Confederation, they left behind this idea that limits were starting points for negotiation, not endpoints for discussion. Sarah watched all this from Infernus and felt strange about her role in it. She had not meant to start a revolution. She had just wanted to collect samples and not die. The fact that not dying had required her to redefine possible for an entire civilization was an accident. You changed us, Schmoss told her on the 5th anniversary of her survival. They stood in the main research chamber of the Chum tunnels, surrounded by equipment and bustling scientists. Before you, we saw the universe as fixed. Species had capabilities and limits, and these were laws. You showed us that the only real law is try harder. That is not always good advice, Sarah pointed out. Sometimes trying harder gets you killed. Yes, Schmoss agreed. His skin was a content blue, the color of understanding. But sometimes it gets you this. He gestured around the chamber. A permanent station on a planet we declared dead. 12 species working together in an environment that should kill them all. Science happening in a place we thought science was impossible. He turned to look at her directly. You did not just survive, Sarah. You proved that survival was negotiable. And that changed everything. The Confederation built a monument on Infernus's surface. They waited until a period of relative calm, when the volcanoes rested and the lava flows slowed. Then they erected a pillar of cooled volcanic rock, carved from the same material that had tried to kill Sarah. The plaque was written in 47 languages, one for each member species of the Confederation. The human translation was simple. Here, humanity proved that the greatest adaptation is the refusal to adapt, to instead reshape reality through sheer, stubborn persistence. Sarah stood at the monument during the dedication ceremony. Around her were colleagues, friends, beings from across known space who had come to honor what she represented. Schmoss was there, his skin cycling through proud colors. Catherine stood at attention, her mandibles clicking in the Taraki gesture of respect. Young researchers from a dozen species watched her with hope in their eyes. Whatever eyes they had, a reporter, a luminary who pulsed questions in light patterns, asked if she ever regretted those 27 days in the tunnels. Asked if, knowing what she knew now, she would do it again. Sarah thought about it honestly. She remembered the pain, the fear, the moments when death seemed certain. She remembered hunger and exhaustion and heat that tried to cook her alive. She remembered every terrible second. Yes, she said. I would do it again. Why? The reporter pulsed. Sarah smiled. She looked out at Infernus, at the lava flows and volcanic peaks and toxic atmosphere. Still deadly. Still hostile. Still trying to kill anything that landed on it. Because I finally got to find out what I was made of, she said. And it turns out I was made of the same thing every human is made of. The decision to keep going. That is all. Just that one decision, made over and over until the problem gets tired. The reporter pulsed confusion. Problems do not get tired. Then you keep going until you get lucky, Sarah replied. Either way, you keep going. That is the human part. Not being stronger or smarter. Just being too stubborn to accept that the universe gets the final say. She turned back to the monument, to the words carved in 47 languages. Around her, the Confederation scientists talked and laughed and planned new expeditions to impossible places. Above her, Infernus's ash-filled sky glowed orange with perpetual fire. Below her, in the Chun tunnels, life persisted in a place designed to end it. And Sarah Chun, who had outlasted fire and accidentally changed a civilization, felt something she had not expected to feel. Pride. Not in surviving, because surviving had been necessary, but pride in what surviving had shown others was possible. The fire had tried to win through heat and time and relentless pressure. It had not known that humans had been shaped by the same forces, hardened by them, made into creatures that treated impossible as a personal challenge rather than a statement of fact. The fire had lost. Not because Sarah was special, but because she was human. And humans, for better or worse, had evolved to be creatures that simply would not stop. Years later, when new species joined the Confederation, they would hear about the human who outlasted fire. They would learn it as history, as a turning point in how the Confederation understood survival. They would visit Infernus and see the monument and the thriving research station and think about what it meant to refuse defeat. And some of them, inspired by a human who had simply decided that stopping was not an option, would find their own fires to outlast, their own impossible problems to reduce to merely difficult. Their own limits to discover were negotiable after all. That was Sarah's real legacy. Not the samples she collected or the station she founded, but the idea she proved with her survival, that the greatest power any being possessed was the choice to continue when continuation seemed pointless. The fire had learned that lesson. And it had never forgotten.